Okay, so here's our newest sign here, and what I want to basically start to introduce the breakdown of what we're going to do for this sign is this is basically going to be a lesson on Hada, and that Hada is a verb that means to do, and there's many verbs in Korean that are something Hada, and a very common example that you're probably aware of right now is 사랑하다. This is just an example that I'm going to use. It doesn't actually appear anywhere on the sign, but I just want to explain what hada does, and especially if you remove it. So 사랑하다 is a verb that means to love. But if I remove the hada from here, I'm left with not a verb, but a noun. Now, 사랑 is just a noun. That means love, and it's the noun form as in love. Like, for example, you can say, I receive lots of love, and that would be a noun. You're not receiving a verb, you're receiving a noun, which is love. That's just one example, and sometimes this actually happens with adjectives as well. You can think of the adjective 행복하다, 행복하다, and this doesn't always work with adjectives. It works better with verbs, but here's an example where 행복하다 means to be happy. It's an adjective that means to be happy, and this can be conjugated like an adjective, just like any other adjective. But if I remove the hada, I'm left with a noun, and here the noun form of to be happy is happiness. And we actually see a lot here, a lot of the stuff that we see here, for example, this and this and technically this, but not so much this, and this and this and this and this and and this and this. All of these are actually noun forms that you could say as verbs. And just before we start to break down sort of what the words mean, I just want you to make sure that you understand that with verbs that end in hada, if you remove the hada, you actually end up with this noun form of that verb. Okay, so that's my introduction. Let me clean this up so we can start talking about this actual sign. There's actually not a lot of grammar in this sign. It's mostly just words, but there's some interesting things that we can talk about with some of the words that we see here. Now, let's just very quickly go through the title here at the very top. 공원 is a very simple word that you probably learned if you've been studying Korean for any amount of time. It's a very simple word that just means park, as in like a public park. And gong is the Hanja character for gong actually is the word for public. And I don't want to focus too much on that because park is a very simple word. But anyways, it means a public park. And 이용하다 is, oh, actually I didn't underline this before. This is another example. This is 이용하다 is a verb that means to use. And if you remove the hada, which we've done here, all I have is iong. If you remove the hada, I'm left with just the noun form of that verb, which is the noun form of to use would be usage or use. You could say use as, to use is a verb, but use or usage is a noun. And the most common word that people would learn in Korean to mean to use or usage or to use the verb would be 쓰다, or maybe even 사용하다. And 쓰다 is most commonly used if you're using something. Typically something that would go away. But if you're thinking about 이용하다, it's something that you would use that sort of in a public sense where you use it with the public and it doesn't really disappear when you use it. So for example, using the what would be a good example? Maybe using the mass public transportation like the subway. You wouldn't necessarily, you wouldn't usually use 쓰다. You say, oh, I use public transportation every day. It'd be awkward to use 쓰다 to say that you use it every day, but it'd be more common to use 이용하다 to say that because it's not something after you use it that is disposable, that goes away, and it's something that you use with a whole bunch of people that's public, and it's something that doesn't go away. So right here we have the public or the park usage, and actually here it is again. 안내하다 is another verb, And I'm sorry I didn't underline these before. I just thought of it now as I was looking at the title. I was focusing more on these words down here. But ane hada means to guide, or to sort of to inform, and more typically to guide. But if I remove the hada, I'm left with the noun form of just ane. And this would, again, this is, I guess, the noun form of to guide would be guidance. And again, here this is would be usage. So the main theme of this sign would be the park, usage, guidance. And in other words, if I'm going to put that in plain, simple English, that's how to use this park, or what you should be doing if you're going to be using this park. And before I get into any of this stuff down here, any of these a lot of these words down here, I want to focus on just a couple of bigger words and bigger themes, and it's this big guy here. And there's these two words here, kumyan and hubyan. And I want to, when I describe this, oh, by the way, here's Gongwan again. So that's park. So we know park is here, and here we see park again. So we know park. But I want to focus on this word here, kumyan and hubyan. Now, when I talk about that, let's get another color here so we can see this better. Kum, red's not good because I have a red circling the no smoking sign. Let's go purple. This kum is basically, it's put before, in some words like this where there's two syllables, and it doesn't always have to be two syllables, to say that something is not done, or should not be done, or won't be done. And in this case, it's saying smoking, because the yun actually refers to smoking. So this is referring to, the yun here doesn't mean smoke, and it doesn't mean smoking, but on its own, this hanja character here sort of refers to smoking. And this kum refers to not doing something. So kumyan together, this would mean not smoking, or to not smoke, or something like that. And Gongwan, again, we know means park. So right away we can say, well, and it's obvious because that's what this sign is saying. It's saying that this is a non-smoking, not smoking, or non-smoking park. Okay, great. Now, hubyan, this yan here, this is the same yan. So we know that this refers to smoking. But hub in this case is referring to if you do smoke. So this kumyan is saying non-smoking, but this hubyan is saying, it's referring to the opposite of not smoking, which is just smoking. And she here refers to, it refers to time, and that this just means in the time that you do smoke, or in other words, if you smoke, or in the time that you are smoking, or something like that. This ryo, it always refers to money, and this word here, kwateryo, is referred to as a fine. So if you're caught smoking, or if you smoke in the park, there will be a fine. And well, how much will the fine be? It will be 5, and man means, it's a Korean number that means 10,000. So it's 5 10,000s, or in other words, 50,000 won. And won is the Korean denomination for money. So far, the main stuff that we've seen up here is how the park usage information, or in other words, how to use the park. And this big theme is it's a non-smoking park, non-smoking park, and if you're caught smoking, there will be a fine of 50,000 won. Okay, now let me clean some of this up, or all of it up, because it's getting a little messy. Now, we just talked about this kum and what it means, and how I described that it means. And again, a lot of these characters that are hanja characters, sometimes it's hard to give it a meaning when it's by itself. But if you connect it with something else, the two syllables or the two characters often have a sort of almost a meaning that's greater than the individual parts. So this kum here, I said it sort of means not, or don't, or won't, or something like that. Something that's an action of whatever this next thing is will not happen. And actually this not, or don't, or won't, this kum character shows up a lot in the other side of the sentences. So if you look at this, in this word you see kum, and in this word here you see kum, and in this word here you see kum, and in this word here you also see kum. And this word kumji is very, very commonly put, as you can guess, because this is a sign, very, very often put at the end of notices on signs that tell you what you shouldn't do. So, obviously there's lots of signs, signs on the highway for driving, or signs anywhere that will say, don't do this, or, you're not allowed to do this. And kumji is the word that, in this case, it basically means don't. And it's just saying, don't do this action. And a very common example that you would see is maybe this. So here's this kumji that we've been talking about the whole time. But 출입 means to enter. And if you say 출입 금지, that would mean do not enter. And there's a whole bunch of other things that you could say, do not do this. You could don't speed, or don't do a whole bunch of different things. But this is a simple example you'd very, very commonly see. Another way that you could actually translate this 출입 금지 it's just to say no trespassing, or something like that. So in all cases, here and here and here, and also down here, it's saying don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, and don't do this. And that's very simple, because we can see the picture. Okay, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, and don't do that. And you can probably guess just by looking at the pictures. This is saying don't pick any flowers. This is saying don't yell at any music notes. That's obviously a joke. And this is saying don't throw little square boxes. Haha, you like my joke. And this is saying make sure you don't walk your dog near some poop. And obviously that's a joke. And anyways, we'll see that I was wrong in all those cases. Well, the flower one's kind of true, but we'll see that we're wrong in all those cases, because we'll look at what each thing is actually trying to say. All right, let me clean this up a little bit. So, and again, in all cases, we know this word, we know this word, we know this word, and we know this word. It's just saying don't do these actions. Okay, so we know that part in all cases. Well, let's see what the sign's telling us not to do. Sumok means a bush, or a brush of trees near, not necessarily a tree, but usually like little brushes or bushes that are near a park. And I don't want to ever focus too much on Hanja, but I know just a little bit of Hanja, and whenever I feel if I know a Hanja character, it's probably good that you should know that one too. I don't know a lot, but I know sort of just the basic ones, and I think it's really important that any learner of Korean learns, at least at the very least, the very basic Hanja. And the one for Mok, and again, I'm not very good at drawing these things, but it looks something like that. And I'm sure somebody's going to come in and say, hey, it doesn't look exactly like that, but that's roughly what it looks like. And this refers to a tree. Just this Mok here refers to a tree. And there's a lot of times where you'd see Mok in a word in Korean, and it's talking about some type of tree, or something to do with a tree. So the bush, or the brush, the brushes, or the bushes, in addition to, this is what mid means, in addition to, I'll just put a plus to say in addition to. There's park again, we learned that here, and we learned it here. In addition to the park, 시설 means facilities. And 해손 means, again, this is a word that I could say, Hada, and that means to damage. But if I remove the hada, I'm just left with damage. And you're saying, well, why would I need to, if I'm talking about a sentence, why would I need to use the noun form of this word? Well, in signs, this is usually how things are written in Korean, and this kumji specifically, this is like if you say do not enter, or something like that, or do not do this. This is just the way that they make that type of reference in Korean. They say blah 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 kumji, just like I said before down here when I said 출입. And again, you could actually say 출입 hada, and you could say 출입 hada, but you usually put kumji after the noun form of the verb, and in this case, it's noun form followed by kumji. So usually before kumji, you want to have a noun. So it would be more natural in Korean, on a sign at least, to say something noun and then kumji. So the bushes, in addition to the park facilities, are damaging the park facilities. Okay, don't do that. And that's, I mean, I don't know. They could have picked a better picture than somebody picking flowers, because I don't really feel like that picture here is really a good representation of what this sentence here is saying. But okay, good enough. Now let's go to this next one. Chisa. Chisa, again, this, it could be a verb. And actually, chisa hada means to cook. And this is, chisa is the noun form of to cook, which is just cooking. And if you think, well, cooking, who's cooking in the park? Well, in Korea, it's common to sort of go to a park and bring up a portable little stove, and that has some fire, and you put a pot over it and stuff like that, and you can all sit around it and eat it and stuff like that. And maybe it's not very common wherever you're from, but in Korea it's relatively common. They have these little things usually in parks. It's like a little raised floor. It's almost like a big, I don't even know what to call it, but it's sort of like this big thing, and Korean people often gather around and sit on this thing, and while the kids are all playing on the thing over here and over here. And sometimes they might have a big pot full of ramen or noodles or something like that, and they'll eat it. So you're saying, well, when are people cooking in the park? Well, it might happen in Korea. Soum refers to noise or sounds and noise, and I guess that's more relevant of what's happening over here with this music note. Soran refers to a disturbance. And you say, well, that's similar to noise, but soran is more about causing a scene and more about the action of, tomfoolery or doing disturbing things, and not necessarily screaming. It could be screaming, but doing something, that you shouldn't really do in a park. And hengwei refers to action. And again, it's saying do not do all of these things. So cooking, loud noises or noises, disturbances, and those types of actions, don't do those. Okay, great. That makes sense, because it's funny that they chose, and I said that I sort of justified the cooking earlier, but it's funny that they only chose noise, disturbances, and cooking as the three things. I could think of a whole lot of other things. Oftentimes, you also see in here as well, you might also see tobak somewhere in this line of actions you shouldn't do, because tobak refers to, again, it's tobak hada is to gamble, but tobak would mean the noun form of to gamble, which is just be gambling. And they usually don't want you gambling in a park with kids around there. But you say, well, how are people gambling in a park? Well, sometimes they might be playing cards, and they might be betting a few thousand won or something like that. So anyways, it doesn't say gambling in this sentence here, but it's common to see a tobak kumji on a sign along with these words here. Now the third sentence, it says this, and they both have this common. I'm getting too purple here. I'm going to change my color. Let's go with this one. This 물. You can't really see that very well, can you? This 물, which you might be saying, oh, 물, I know that means water. Well, 물, it comes up here, and it comes up here, and it actually comes up down here as well. Oh, look, and it actually comes up here as well. This is actually a Hanja character, and again, somebody's going to get mad at me as I draw this, but the Hanja character for this, and I'm just doing this off memory, it looks something like this, where you have this, and 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 I think there's only two there. That's the character for mur. And it doesn't mean water. Well, mur does mean water, but in this case, with this Hanja character, it means thing or object or something like that. And omur and pegulmur, they both refer to waste. And they're slightly different. It's a little bit hard, especially for a beginner, to really know the difference between these two. But omur is usually like some sort of disgusting waste that you'd want to throw out, like maybe some food waste or something gross that you want to throw out. But pegimur, it also translates to waste. Actually, omur would more generally translate maybe to garbage or rubbish or something like that. But pegimur is more about like things that you used and maybe because it's broken, like you had a fan and now the fan broke and now you're just like going to the park and throwing it there, or you have like a car and the door fell off or something like that, and you throw the car door outside. That would be more about pigimur, where you have a machine or something like that, and you throw the machine out in the garbage. It's not gross, but it's just this thing that you don't need anymore, and it's more about like a big piece of machinery. But you can translate both these things to waste. Donin just means or, so it's saying this disgusting waste or this big heavy machinery waste, or it doesn't have to be big or heavy, but some other type of waste. This waste or this waste, and again, don't. Well, what do you think this is going to say? Well, it's going to say don't do something with these wastes, and you can see what this person here is doing. You can probably guess that this is going to mean throw out or dump or something like that. And you'd be right, but it's not the entire case. Tugi, again, tugi hada is the verb. That means to dump or to throw out. But we have the noun form, just like here we had the noun form of this. Here we have the noun form of this, and tugi means to dump. And it's, of course, it's saying don't dump it. But what is this mudan? Well, mudan is doing something without permission. And mu actually means without, and you see that sometimes with mu ryo. And before earlier I talked about ryo meaning money, and if you have mu ryo, that means without money, and that means muryo actually means free. Now, mudan means to do something without permission. And a very, very common example where you'd see mudan, I'm running out of space here, I guess I'll have to do it in the upper right corner. Mudan, a very, very common place you'll see it around Korea is if you see it in maybe mudan hwangdan. And this means, this thing here means crossing the road. And mudan hwangdan is crossing the road without permission. And the way that we would say that in English is just jaywalking. And that's the way that you would say it is without permission, you're crossing the road. Well, here, you're without permission, you're throwing stuff out. So if I'm going to talk about what the meaning of this whole sentence is, well, it's going to be throwing stuff out, or sorry, do not throw stuff out without permission, and specifically the waste or the disgusting waste. Again, this is getting all messy here, so let's clean this up. Now, on this last one, we have this ewan, and I'll actually talk about the whole thing altogether. 동물 means animal, and ewan means sort of love, or to, again, ewan hada means to love or to admire, and ewan 동물 would mean, well, if it's an animal that you love, and in other words, and this yellow is not the best color, an animal that you love is what we call a pet. Well, a pet, and pesar, I talked about mur and how it just means thing or object. Pesar, oh, look at this. Pesar hada means to excrete or something like that, or to excrete. Pesar hada. But we're not talking about pesar hada, we're talking about pesar, which means sort of excretion. And if it's the things or the objects, again, mur means object or thing or something like that. If it's the object of excretion, well, I don't want to get too visual here, but you can sort of see what I might mean if I'm talking with this dog here. The object of excretion, this pesarbu, that's just a good way to say, well, this thing here. And pangchi, again, pangchi hada, it refers to, it's a verb that means to neglect, or to do nothing about, or sort of to leave and to forget about. But pangchi, just without the hada, just the noun, would mean to just to leave, or to, whatever that noun would be. No, sorry, I said to leave, but just leaving something there, or neglection, or something like that. And you can guess why they'd be saying this. They're saying your pet poo, and again, I'm sorry I said the word poo, but I'm just pointing at this dog's poo. Your pet poo and leaving it there. So leaving your pet poo and not taking it with you. I'll just write not taking with you. and then there's a little dot here, but it could be a comma. 목줄. Now, 줄 means string or rope, and 목 means neck. And you can think about what this would mean on a dog. If this means string or rope and this means neck, well, this is going to be a leash. And I don't even know how to spell leash in English. I'm going to guess that that's how you spell it. So a leash, and again, we know what this word means. It means don't. Now, you can, and somehow this final word has to mean to not put on, because we know that no sign is going to say make sure your dog does not have a leash. The sign's going to say make sure your dog has a leash. So this sign says leash and it says do not. So in some way this whole thing is going to have to mean make sure your dog has a leash. And I want to talk about what this 착용 would mean. 착용 up here was the only place I got space. 착용 is a very, very, very difficult word, and if you're a beginner, and even if you're at an intermediate or advanced level, I don't really recommend that you put this word into your list of words that you need to remember. It's a good word that is commonly used on signs, and lo and behold, this is what we're talking about. It's a sign. But it just means to wear or to put on. You might see it on a sign talking about maybe you might see it on a sign talking about seatbelts, telling you to wear your seatbelts or something like that on a sign. But it's not really something that you will say or even read in a book. But in a sign, it would be more common. And that's, of course, we're talking about a sign here, so that's why we're seeing it. But it's not the most common word in the world. But this means, again, to wear, and when would you say, well, maybe on a seatbelt, but I guess you could use it if you're talking about a dog wearing a leash. I would more be inclined, if you're going to talk about a verb, 목줄, I would be more inclined to use the verb 끼다. But if you want to be on a sign, and I guess you'd want to use 장용하다. And this mi, I'm going to talk about just the hanja character for that word. It actually looks very similar to the hanja character for 목. For me, it looks something like this. And again, I'm always worried when I do these, because I know I'm going to make a mistake. It looks very, very similar to the other one, but it looks something like this. And this means sort of without, I'm going to get another color here. This means without this. And a very common example, probably the most common place where you'd see this mi, is in mi wan. And in this case, wan means completed, and mi wan would mean to not be completed. So it's very common to see mi wan and then see something come out after that, and that's saying an uncompleted blah 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 blah. But here, this is not wearing whatever this thing is. And if we look at this whole sentence, this is pet, their poo, neglection, and comma, leash, not wearing, don't do any of that stuff. So in English, we would change the order. Don't have your pet, again, the pet's here, don't have your pet not have a leash, and make sure you pick up their poo, is what this is saying.